So welcome to This Cycling Live. Today I'm delighted to be joined by fitness guru and social activist, Seth G. We've got a special episode for you today because in this week of the American election, we'll be talking to Seth about his journey across America, riding from Los Angeles all the way to Washington, D.C. by bicycle, with the purpose along the way to have conversations with the full spectrum of American citizens. So we're going to talk about what he learned about riding the bike, but also about what he learned about the current state of America. So Seth, welcome to you. And I have to ask
How you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. I have to ask you, after this incredible journey across America, how do you feel about being an American after this trip?
It's funny. I think that unpopular belief right here. I'm actually, at least in my social circles, I'm actually very proud to be an American, and especially after speaking to so many just amazing people and very interesting people and passionate people about themselves, their country, and what they do.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of change, underway in the US at the moment. I mean, looking at you from across the other side of the Atlantic, I'm living in Belgium in Europe. There seems to be like a lot of polarization happening right now in the US. So, I mean, what did you discover about the changes underway in the country?
Yeah, to be point blank, people are starting to care more, which is really amazing. I mean, we're having some of the highest voter turnout that we've ever had in history, which is really exciting. I think the rest of the world thinks it's pretty funny. I know where you're originally from, Australia, you get fined if you don't vote.
Yeah, it's compulsory voting, man. You go and you give your vote, you give your opinion, or you get a fine. So you don't have much choice.
Correct. And I mean, for those who have the resources, you can choose to vote. Obviously, we've had some setbacks this year, and actually setbacks for many years. It's not always easier for certain populations to go vote, but it's not mandatory. Yeah. And I think that people are definitely putting more of an urge on that because I think they realize how powerful that vote is. You're not really voting also for a specific person, you're voting for the policies and things that person stands for as well. So I think people are starting to kind of get that in their head. I don't know if it's the younger generation. I don't even know if I am the younger generation anymore. I'm not like Gen Z or anything.
But we have had, but this year in the US, there's just, in the world, of course, we've had the pandemic going on, which of course is caused a huge amount of so many challenges to everyone. But on top of that, in the US, you've had Black Lives Matter, you've had issues around LGBT rights and so much happening. So, to what extent is that also motivating people to become more politically engaged? And does that vary a lot? When you go from the West Coast through the center of the US or Midwest and all the way to the East Coast, do you see a lot of, very different opinions? Is there, are people converging on certain topics?
Absolutely. I think that, certain parts of America, you'll see populations that aren't really going to be affected, to be honest, completely honest with this election, but they're starting to kind of wake up to people's kind of outcries. Like one of the questions we had was Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter? And it was a really hard question because, of course, all lives matter. But right now, if you're not addressing Black Lives Matter, then you're not paying attention. Yeah. And so it was very interesting to see entire populations, mostly white, not taking responsibility. So that was an interesting sentiment. Now, did any of these people wish harm on Black people? No, they want Black and brown people to, I think, have equal rights. But I think a really big thing about being an American is our independence and, our comforts in not being willing to compromise. And so I think what is starting to sway a little bit, and I would like to think, like I was saying before, not just with younger people, but also with everyone, is that's starting to shift a little bit. And people are realizing if we are going to be this great nation we say we are, then it needs to be great for everyone, not just one small demographic.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And for us again, because I'm a big fan of actually the American talk shows, right? So I listen to Trevor Noah, for example. I'm a big fan of his, and
Yeah.
he really makes me
Yeah.
laugh, But sometimes, also when I'm watching Trevor Noah or some of the other talk shows, they show us some of these snippets from like Fox News, right?
Hmm.
And for me as an Australian or someone living in Europe, when I'm watching Fox News, it's almost like it's an alternative reality.
Mm.
There's this idea of alternative facts. I mean, for you being out there on the road and you were riding your bike and you were stopping at diners, you were stopping at truck
Yeah.
stops, you were interacting with all kind of communities. What was the weirdest kind of conversation you remember, or the most surreal conversation you remember having along the way?
I mean, truth be told, when you're stopping at these places, and even for some of our interviews, you're speaking to someone for 45 minutes to an hour. So you can dive as deep as that person wants to dive in. But I did definitely have some interesting conversations. One of our interviewees said that, Planned Parenthood has a class action lawsuit because they're selling baby parts. And we were
Right.
like, where did you find out this information?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of like one of the more extreme things. I mean, speaking of talk show I actually spoke with Glenn Beck,
Yeah.
the CEO of Blaze Media.
Right.
And, I was listening to his podcast before. It's good to be informed on all angles. And what actually was a surprising thing on a really positive, affirming sense is, some of the things he says I definitely don't agree with, to say the least. And that's, I think, putting it very, very, very politely.
Sure.
But it was interesting to speak to this man and understand that he is aware that, there is division. I'm not sure if he's taking ownership for being part of the division, as many mainstream media sources are, but he knows that there has to be compromise, which was actually very cool to hear from, someone on the very polar opposite of the partisan spectrum to speak to him and him acknowledge that, and speak to this liberal LA guy biking across America and agreeing that we need to come together and it needs to be about compromise. So so there's that awareness, which makes me hopeful.
That's good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, that's with this cycling life, we talk so much about the life of being on the bike, and looking at you, you're a pretty big guy. You've done a lot of working out. You have your gym. You're not the leanest, skinniest guy.
No.
I mean, what did you learn about yourself along the way? I mean, I'm not here just physically, because I guess you had to get over some mountains, but
literally.
Yeah. What did you learn about yourself along the way of the journey? Because you had a lot of hours, I guess, just to think and reflect as those miles were ticking by.
Yes, I went across literal and figurative mountains.
Sure.
From the beginning, I mean, first and foremost, I learned a lot about just my bike and how ill-equipped I was. I mean, I was using a road bike, which I 25 millimeter tires. Like, I would have not done that again.
Yeah.
Even if I had been a little bit slower, I was learning it was not about how fast you can get to one point. It really, I know it sounds cliche, but it's about the journey. And I think that's probably what you and your viewers also appreciate. Obviously, you want to be fast, but it's also about, the empowerment, the process, the pushing yourself along the way and enjoying the journey for the beautiful things that you see and the aches and the pains and for its full circle experience. Yeah. So, physically, I learned that carbs were my best friend.
Okay, that's good to know. And how about the weather? Did you experience any bad weather, the winds or rain and stuff like that? Was that part of it?
I experienced every single season imaginable. So while I was going out through the Southwest, it was 100+ degree days, just dry. I was going through over 2 liters, 3 liters, 4 liters one day of water a day, just because I was sweating so much and it was disgusting. And then after Texas, I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. I'm seeing fall. And then after I went up towards like Chicago and Illinois and like the middle of America near the Great Lakes, it was just awful. I went through like a hurricane. I went through Hurricane Delta.
Yeah, we saw that. We saw that crazy weather, man. And for a guy from like LA, I mean, you're the beach crew guy. You're the blue sky and sunshine kind of people. But Seth, as a very wise Norwegian friend of mine once said, there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing, man. So you get.
Okay. So case in point, when I was going through the Hurricane Delta, I was wearing this actual shirt. and
Okay.
this
Okay.
is very thin. And you may think overseas, like, oh, a hurricane means like the weather's balmy and warm. No, it was about 40 degrees, or I don't know what that is, about 10 degrees
10 degrees
maybe.
Celsius. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and downpouring, and just this in, like, a pair of riding shorts. So
Okay.
that was, yeah, there was bad clothing options made for sure. I then, soon after that, never let that happen again. I got a waterproof parka, or like actually a pretty thin, like a shirt to put on after, because it just got so cold after that. And then,
Cool.
there was a couple days that were just beautiful fall, like
Mm.
crisp. I'm sure you guys experience it too.
Yeah.
Riding along rivers, through woods, like that was amazing. But I definitely had my fair share of awful clothing choices. We'll just put it that way.
Well, there's also,
Yeah.
but Seth, there's always, there's always that consideration between practicality and what makes you look good as well. And I think that's
Of
a discussion we
course.
often have on This Cycling Life, is that,
Yeah.
aesthetics and beauty should not always be sacrificed for speed. So we're okay.
Never. But
We're all right with you on that.
I was making a movie. Yeah, I had to look good for the drone shots and the
Yeah,
little
yeah,
side by
sure, sure,
side.
sure.
So
That's
yeah.
cool. That's cool. So, I mean, just to maybe just for our listeners, I mean, if you were talking to someone who was about to set off and ride across a continent,
Mm,
what would be your two or three pieces of wisdom to give them to get through it? Is it about comfort food? Is it about, I don't know, thick bike shorts? What would be your
yeah.
tips?
First and foremost, plan more time than you could imagine.
Mm.
Bolster in more time than you ever could have thought of, because things are going to arise.
Yeah.
Second, line your tires. I would say put a tire liner in there,
Okay.
and maybe use some sealant as well.
Go
After
for
I
the
did that, I
tubeless.
mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool.
yeah, or go tubeless. Exactly. Yeah, either or, but I would strongly recommend that. And then truly stop thinking about it from how fast you can get to, your point B. It's not about that. It's going to be much more enjoyable if you take the time to, just be present, not bog yourself down mentally if you haven't hit a certain checkpoint at a certain time. Get off your bike if you see something beautiful. That's really what I would say to my past self at this point.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That's great. And when will the documentary be out? Because I mean, you were doing these amazing interviews along the way. You were
Yeah.
working with the film crew on the documentary. So when should we see that out?
I mean, I was hoping inauguration day, which in production world probably means early spring.
Although given the current state of counting, nobody knows when that
We
might
don't
be.
know when
There
inauguration
could be
day is.
some law
No.
cases and all sorts of stuff along the
Yes.
way. But okay, but
Exactly.
you're hoping for inauguration day.
Yeah, I'm hoping for early February, I'd say,
Okay.
for us to have something to tease the world with.
Excellent. Good. Seth G,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. It's
Yeah.
been a pleasure, very special week for America and for the world. Of course, as we're recording this, actually, we're still awaiting your
I
results,
know.
but incredible times indeed. Thanks for the generosity of your time, and we certainly
Yeah.
wish you every success with the documentary. For our
Thank
viewers,
you.
of course, if you have liked this video, please do give us the thumbs up, and of course, please do subscribe to the This Cycling Life YouTube channel. Seth, thanks again. It's been a real pleasure. And
Thank you so much.
of course, you've crossed the finish line because you've made it to Washington
Yeah.
DC. And you know what
Yeah.
every cyclist does when they cross the finish line is they raise their hands in the air. So let's finish
Yes.
with that one. Okay, Seth?
All right. Did
Superb.
it.